going to try and escape.
They're perfectly capable of training.
Concussion.
Ow!
Oh yeah, volunteering at General Sam's at 6:30.
Okay, let's talk about Watergate.
Change it to 6.
I remind you that yesterday Nixon dominated the 1972 election. How does someone that goes from being popular with liberals, being popular with conservatives, being popular from East Coast, West Coast, how does someone go from this to being the only president to end his term early, but not because he got shot? What happened? Okay. And the thing that happened was Watergate. So there are obvious parallels between Nixon and Trump today. I am not suggesting that Trump is in any way guilty of anything. I'm simply saying that it seems like the U.S. is kind of heading down this familiar path again. I'll agree with you there that it does seem like about a third of the country thinks Trump's the greatest thing ever. A third still can't believe he ever got elected, and a third think football. What is the Watergate? If I were to be actually looking at the Watergate, what would I be looking at?
A gate of water.
A canal? No. What is it? What is the Watergate? Does anyone know?
It's a scandal.
It's a hotel. It is a hotel in Washington, D.C. It's still there. The Watergate is a hotel. But because the term Watergate has been used over and over again, now whenever there's a scandal, we just take that scandal and add the word gate, and it becomes Spygate and Trump Gate. And the word gate has come to mean scandal. There it is. There's the Watergate Hotel. There's where Forrest Gump was staying, and he saw the burglars breaking in right across the open area there. And I've just given you the answer to the next question I was going to ask, and that is, how did it all start? Do we know the story?
Trump, or no.
Wahapa, as Grandpa Potter used to say.
No, I was going to say.
Wahapa.
Forrest Gump.
Wahapa there was a burglary. There was a small burglary. It didn't even make the front page. The people broke in to some office in the Watergate. They got caught because Forrest Gump saw it and called the cops. Now, parts of what I just said aren't true, but they did get caught.
Didn't hear anything.
And I mean, if you're caught in a burglary, it wasn't like they were armed or anything. They were caught. It would seem like, you admit, yeah, we got caught. Okay, and then you do your, I don't know, year or two of some sort of punishment, maybe a little bit of prison time, but it doesn't seem like it's all that serious of an offense. They broke in, they got caught. Okay, but that's not the end of the story, because what made it so weird was, and there were 5 of them, 5 people broke in, but what made it so weird was that none of them said a thing to the cops. They all exercised their Fifth Amendment right to not say anything, which is your right. You can do that. But the cops caught that. It was just kind of weird. Why don't you just admit that you broke in? What's the big deal? And none of them said a thing. And all 5 of them were sort of savvy as far as their rights. They kind of knew what their rights were. And that struck the cops as sort of unusual. Right? If a cop pulls you over and says, "Can I look in your trunk?" and you say, No, you cannot look in my trunk, doesn't that raise the radar of the police that means you have something that you're hiding? Yes? When all 5 had nothing to say to the cops. Like, why were you there? I plead the 5th. That raises, some of you get that. That raises the radar of the police that, okay, something's going on here.
Maybe they're bluffing.
That's right.
Maybe they can't talk.
No, they could talk. Well, that piqued the interest of the police that there was something else going on. And then the second thing that's sort of interesting is, what did they break into? That's sort of interesting too. Does anyone happen to know?
An office.
What office?
Small.
they broke into the office of the Democratic Party. They broke into the Democratic Party headquarters. So they're not there to steal money. They're not there to steal, CDs or drugs. They're there to steal information. They want the dirt on the candidates. Well, if somebody breaks into the Democratic Party headquarters, what might someone suspect? Who might you suspect is behind it?
Trump.
You might, not Trump. You might suspect that a Republican nutcase is sort of behind this whole thing, and that's what the cops thought as well. So there was a suspected cover-up, and so there was an investigation, and the investigation turned towards known members of the Republican Party. Right? Somebody broke into the Democratic Party headquarters. It might be somebody with Republican leanings, and so the police started investigating, and the investigation revealed eventually that Nixon may have something to do with this. Not necessarily anything directly related to the break-in, but somehow he knew, Nixon somehow knew. And then here's where it gets just kind of fascinating. Somebody in the Nixon administration, someone deep inside, started secretly telling a Washington, D.C. newspaper secret information. They called him Deep Throat because he spoke really low voice, right? So this secret guy started revealing to the Washington newspaper that Nixon's involved. You gotta keep going. You gotta keep investigating. They did.
Was it that guy?
And that guy also revealed something to the Washington newspaper that was kind of interesting. Nixon recorded every one of his conversations in the Oval Office. Recorded everything. Well, you got to get your hands on those tapes, right? You got to get your hands on those taped conversations. Okay, so they got to get their hands on these taped conversations because that would mean Nixon, whatever he said in the Oval Office, there's a record of it. Okay, and so the Congress started getting involved and saying, all right, what's going on here? Nixon maybe had some recorded conversations. What's happening here? Hey, Richard, you have those recorded conversations? Give them over. We are going to subpoena them. Does anyone know what that means?
Take them.
If you've been subpoenaed, where are you going?
Jail.
Yeah, you're going to some sort of a legal proceeding. Okay, Congress subpoenaed the tapes. And Nixon said, no. It's the same thing Donald Trump said this morning. Congress right now, the House of Representatives is requiring that certain members of the Trump administration come before Congress and testify, which they have the right to do. But the president, and by the way, George Washington has done this. Barack Obama did this. FDR did. Almost every president has done this at some point and basically said, no, we don't have to cooperate with you because of something called executive privilege. Executive privilege is basically refusing to cooperate in the name of national security. So Nixon said, look, I can't turn over the tapes. Doing so would be harmful to the national security. It would harm the nation, which some people in Congress said, no, it wouldn't. But so you need to hand over the tapes. But anyway, this is a legal defense. I'm not going to turn it over. Well, in the middle of all this is where it gets really weird. The vice president resigned for something completely unrelated. He didn't pay his taxes. One thing you should do, pay your taxes. That's how they got Capone. You ever heard of Al Capone?
Yep.
Noted gangster in Chicago, murdered people. They didn't get him for that. They got him because he didn't pay his taxes. Right? He sold alcohol illegally, but didn't pay taxes for it. That's how they got him. Okay? Anyway, this guy didn't pay his taxes, so he resigned. So the president names a new vice president. That guy's name is Gerald Ford. This is fascinating stuff, right? So understand that there's now a vice president who was not elected vice president. You understand? He wasn't elected. He was chosen by Richard Nixon. Okay? So the Congress says, look, if you're not going to cooperate with us, we'll just hire somebody called a special counsel or a special prosecutor. We'll arm this guy with the ability to investigate what the crap is going on here. What is going on? Now, does anyone know political stuff? What agency investigates criminal proceedings at the federal level?
FBI.
Well, the FBI works for this larger agency. It's a department.
CIA.
The CIA works for the military. The Department of
Justice.
The Justice Department. Who is so if you are the head of the Defense Department, you are the Secretary of Defense. If you are if you're the head of the department that makes money, you're the Secretary of the Treasury. Well, who's the head of the Judicial Department? Not Judicial, the Justice Department.
Secretary of Justice.
Yes, you would think it would be called the Secretary of Justice, but it's not. It's called the Attorney General. Very good. The Attorney General. Who's the Attorney General's boss? The President. The President. So understand that this guy was hired, this person right here was hired to investigate the president for criminal wrongdoing, and he was fired by the president. Do you understand?
No, I'm lost. You lost.
This person was hired by the Attorney General to investigate if the president did anything criminal, and the president fired him.
Oh, I
Fired
get
the
it.
guy that the Attorney General hired.
Fired the guy that the Attorney General hired. You got it.
So
Well, can we at least agree that there's a question of, I don't even know how to say
Why?
this. Like,
He didn't let them subpoena
Conflict of
the
interest.
tapes, and they.
imagine if I was your boss and your job was to find out if I did something criminal, and you started finding something, so I fired you. Right? That's what's going on here. It was called the special Saturday Night Massacre. The special prosecutor, whose job it was to investigate the president, was fired by the president. And again, I'm going to say that there are a lot of parallels here to the current administration because something similar may have happened. The FBI director's name was Comey, and he started investigating President Trump, and Trump fired him. Now, I am not suggesting that that's why he was fired, but that's why some people think he was fired.
Didn't we write a book?
He did. He wrote a book.
And this is all because they broke into the.
Well, that's because that's the
Democratic
initial part. The initial part was the break-in, and then it was revealed that this probably was bigger than those 5. So then an investigation starts leading to things, but then he gets fired. So again, so the special prosecutor is now fired. So Congress again goes to the president and says, you need to turn over those tapes. Turn them over. And the president said, no, executive privilege, not going to do it. And so the Congress, now this is where synthesis is so useful. What we could do is look at the way the Nixon thing was handled to see if the same thing might happen in our current situation. What the Congress did was go to the Supreme Court and say, Supreme Court, order the president to turn over those tapes. Tell him to turn over those tapes. And they did. The Supreme Court, in a ruling, said, Mr. President, you need to turn over those tapes. And here's what Nixon did. Nixon said, I tell you what, I'm not going to turn over those tapes, but I will type a complete report. I will type it up. I'll have my secretary do it, and we'll turn that over. And at first, Congress said, well, okay, I mean, if it's the same words, what's the big deal? So they did. And they were given a report, it was like this thick, but over half of it was blacked out, right? Because some of it was redacted. And again, what we can do is look at the exact same thing happened with Mr. Trump. And again, I am not suggesting that Trump is guilty of anything. Please don't take me down that path. But the Mueller report, significant portions of it are blacked out. And they're blacked out because with Nixon, he said, I need to black that stuff out. It's for the national security. Now, in our current situation, Trump didn't black that stuff out. the special counsel blacked it out, again, with national security in mind. And so in both cases, Nixon and Trump, Congress doesn't like that very much. You can't give us this report. Half of it's blacked out. Give us the report. Oh, okay. If it's a copy of the tapes, same thing. So he did. Nixon turned over a copy of the tapes, but guess what? Minutes were blanked out, right? At one point, there's an 18-minute gap. 18 minutes of nothing, right? And what? You damaged evidence. And you know what, Nixon? Honestly, this is what he said. He messed up the record and the play button. So instead of recording what was on this to go to this, he played that and recorded. So he put blank onto the original tape because he didn't play and record. He played and recorded. So he put blank tape onto the original tape, but that's messing with evidence. You can't do that. You have just tampered with evidence. You've done evidence tampering. Okay, so now they got him. They got Nixon, on the very least, on messing with evidence. What happens now? What do you do with a president that you find is probably guilty of some sort of a crime? Go ahead.
So even if you do it on accident.
Okay, you could claim it was an accident. I mean, you can claim it, and if they believe you, fine. Right? Yeah, impeachment is next, and just understand this, though. Nixon was not impeached. He was almost impeached, but he was not because he quit. He quit first. Just a lesson in life, by the way. If you're about to get fired, quit first. Walk out with a shred of dignity. Right? You walk into the office, and the boss says, "You're fired." You say the following: "You can't fire me. I quit," and walk out. And the boss will say, "Okay, fine."
What about severance?
Well, I was about to say that. Like, you do know that quitting takes away your ability to receive what's called severance. If you get fired, you get paid. If you quit, you don't. But you'll have your dignity. So think about it. Would you rather have cash or dignity?
Cash.
Cash. Okay. Nixon is no longer president. So what, again, I'm inviting you to consider is the possibility that something like this might happen in our near future. Nixon is no longer president. He's a private citizen. And as a private citizen, you can be criminally prosecuted. Trump right now, as president, is, I don't want to say the word immune, but a president cannot be prosecuted criminally until he's removed from office. That's why you have to be impeached first. You have to be impeached and then removed. Then they can go after you as far as criminal proceedings. Well, Nixon kind of skipped that part and he just quit. So now it's possible that the United States can prosecute a former president for criminal behavior. But the next president pardoned him.
Which is why.
Okay, good question. Let's think about that for a second here. He's asking, well, why? Why did they pardon Nixon? But before we answer that, let's look at who did this first, because it's fascinating. Who pardoned him?
Ford.
That got appointed.
By whom?
Ford.
Him.
Aha! Aha! Look at that. The guy that pardoned Nixon was the guy named vice president by Nixon. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, huh?
I'll make you president if you keep me clean.
Something like that may have happened. I am not saying that that's what happened. I'm saying that's what some people think happened. I'll name you vice president. I will then resign. You will become president. Please pardon me. Please pardon me. Synthesis. Let's go back. Do you remember? I know this is a while, but the 1824 election. This is a while ago, but this was the election where John Quincy Adams beat Andrew Jackson. But does anyone happen to remember how that happened? Because Jackson got more votes than John Quincy Adams, but Adams was elected president. Do you remember how that happened? No one got the majority, so it goes to the House of Representatives, and then what? Very good. All right, Mr. Cook, very good. Another candidate for president told his supporters, vote for John Quincy Adams. When John Quincy Adams then won, that guy was named Secretary of State. That's a different story. Okay. Now, to Ben's question, why? Why? Why would you pardon this guy for engaging in criminal behavior? I will tell you what Ford said. Ford said, it's time to move on. It's time to move on.
The investigation.
He called it the national disgrace. The national disgrace is over. How would it look having a former president in prison? It would just look bad. Can we just, the guy quit, can we just move on? Now, again, what we can do, this is why history is fun, is it possible that in the near future, something like that might, I kind of doubt it actually, but might happen. I don't know. Who knows? Okay, any questions? Go ahead.
That's a lot of info.
So he like destroyed the tapes. Or like
The tapes were altered.
The only thing on him was like, yo, dude, what's up?
That's a good question. I remember hearing a few years back that current technology might be able to reveal what that 18-minute gap was because it was just taped over, I guess. I don't know. Mara, everybody.
No, okay, so remind me again, who actually does know what's actually on the tapes? Nixon and
Nixon did. Well, whoever he was talking to.
no one knows.
The guys who broke.
Well, whoever was in the room when Nixon was doing the conversing.
The guys who broke in the water.
There were people who spent time in prison for this stuff. Not the president, but some other people that were under the president spent time in prison for Watergate. Okay. Any questions? So what we're going to do now is we're going to reconvene our three groups. So whoever was over here before, reconvene over there. Whoever was over there before, reconvene over there. Judges, gather right here, and then we'll figure out where you go.
Oh, this was my favorite topic in American history besides the Revolutionary War.